Imagine for a moment the creature that has caused the most human deaths throughout all of history. Forget fearsome tigers or legendary dragons. The surprising truth is, it's the tiny flea. Hold on tight. We're about to take a wild leap through human history, led by these minuscule masters. And now for a real blast from the past. Let's dial our time machine back a staggering 150 million years. Forget everything you thought you knew about fleas. Back then, their ancient ancestors weren't the tiny specks we deal with today. Picture this, fleas nearly the size of your fingernail, sharing the planet with giant dinosaurs. Just imagine trying to squash one of those prehistoric pests under your thumb. It would have been a real challenge. These not-so-tiny terrors weren't just content to crawl around on their massive, scaly hosts. Oh no, they were evolving, perfecting their craft, and becoming true masters of their domain. Not only were they happily feasting on the thick, rich blood of ancient lizards, but they were also developing an incredible secret weapon that would define their species, the super jump. Think about that, a fingernail-sized creature, powered by dino blood, getting ready to launch itself into the prehistoric air. And when we say super jump, we truly mean it. These minuscule yet mighty parasites could perform feats of athleticism that defy belief, leaping over 200 times their own body length. To put that in perspective, imagine a human being jumping clear over the Statue of Liberty in a single bound. That's the kind of power we're talking about. They literally propelled themselves like tightly wound springs, turning every jump into a high-speed escape or a swift pursuit. This amazing ability wasn't just a party trick. It was crucial for escaping danger or finding their next gargantuan meal. Talk about big jumps for tiny creatures. So we just talked about giant fleas, but what if I told you these tiny terrors have been with us for way longer than you think, literally evolving right alongside us? Imagine our earliest human ancestors, still swinging through the trees, probably covered in luscious long hair. Well, that hair wasn't just for warmth or good looks, it was a 5-star all-you-can-eat buffet for the flea. As we humans started losing some of that glorious body hair, becoming the less furry creatures we are today, you might think the fleas packed up and left. Nope, these little opportunists simply adapted. From clinging to our remaining patches of hair, they bravely ventured to new frontiers, like burrowing right into our skin. And then, when we got smart and invented clothes, the fleas, ever the innovators, moved right into our ancient wardrobes. Talk about persistent houseguests. And they weren't just content to settle down. Oh no, our ancestors were nomads, constantly exploring, and their tiny companions were right there, literally hitchhiking across the globe. From the moment humans began spreading out of Africa, whether trekking across vast land bridges or braving ancient seas on makeshift rafts, fleas were nestled comfortably in our belongings, our hair, or our skin. They colonized every continent we did, ensuring that no matter where our species went, a lively flea population was there to greet them. It was a microscopic world tour, and we were the unwitting tour guides. Switching gears, let's zoom in on a fascinating, if somewhat unsettling, aspect of ancient life. You know how ancient Egyptians famously revered cats, right? They treated them like royalty. Well, fleas had their own kind of devotion to these majestic felines. While the Egyptians pampered their sacred cats, the fleas were busy worshipping their blood supply, one tiny sip at a time. It was a perfect, albeit parasitic, symbiosis. And it wasn't just the cats feeling the tickle. From the sun-drenched pyramids of Egypt to the sprawling colosseums of Rome, these tiny jumpers infiltrated every corner of society. Imagine a pharaoh distracted by an ankle bite, or a Roman senator subtly scratching under his toga. Slaves, nobles, even the bravest legionnaires, no one was safe. The maddening itch was the great equalizer, proving a flea could bring anyone to their knees. But here's where these minuscule marvels truly became history shapers. They weren't just a nuisance. They were silent, insidious biological weapons, completely unaware of their destructive power. Forget armies clashing. All it took was one nearly invisible bite from an infected flea, transmitting deadly bacteria. A simple itch could rapidly escalate into widespread sickness, devastating populations, and even bringing mighty empires to their knees. The smallest creatures can wield the biggest historical impact. You think you've heard it all about fleas, right? Well, let's fast forward to the Middle Ages, a time that truly shows how these tiny insects decided the fate of millions. Picture this: Europe, bustling cities, lots of people, and even more rats. And guess who loved those rats? Our tiny, jumping friends, the fleas. But these weren't just any fleas. Some of them were carrying a deadly secret, a bacteria that caused the Black Death. When these fleas bit an infected rat, they picked up the nasty germs. Then, as the rats died off, the hungry fleas, with nowhere else to go, leaped onto the nearest warm body, often a human. And with that tiny bite, they delivered a devastating blow, spreading the plague from rat to person. The results were catastrophic. In just a few short years, this microscopic menace carried by unsuspecting fleas wiped out an unimaginable number of lives. We're talking about over 200 million people across Europe. Imagine entire towns going silent, bustling streets turning into eerie emptiness. It was a time when death became a constant companion, leaving behind a trail of sorrow and fear that reshaped the continent. This wasn't just a local outbreak, it was a global catastrophe, all thanks to a creature you can barely see. But the flea's impact wasn't just about the horrifying death toll. Oh no, it dug much deeper than that. This plague didn't just kill people, it fundamentally shook the very foundations of society. With so many people gone, especially farmers and laborers, the old feudal system, where everyone had their fixed place, began to crumble. Land became worthless, labor became priceless. Survivors suddenly had leverage they never dreamed of, demanding better wages and conditions. The social order, once rigid and unyielding, began to crack, paving the way for massive changes in how people lived, worked, and governed themselves. Who knew something so small could bring down empires, not with an army, but with a simple bite and a terrible itch? You might think we're done with fleas, but prepare to have your mind blown. From disease vectors to actual circus performers. That's right. In the 19th century, people weren't just swatting these tiny jumpers. They were training them. Imagine fleas no bigger than a speck, kicking miniature soccer balls, or even doing tiny tightrope walks. They'd meticulously harness them with fine gold wire or silk thread. And these little powerhouses would pull chariots, carriages, and even kick small lightweight balls. It was like a tiny insect Olympics, showcasing their incredible strength and jumping ability. Sounds like something out of a fantastical story, right? But flea circuses were no joke. These weren't just backyard hobbies. They were full-blown, incredibly popular spectacles across Europe, especially starting in the 1830s. Louis Bertolato, an Italian impresario, famously advertised an extraordinary exhibition of industrious fleas in London. People would flock to these shows, marveling as tiny fleas seemingly played cards, formed orchestras, or even reenacted historical battles like Napoleon's defeat. It was an entire sideshow attraction, complete with a charismatic ringmaster, captivating audiences with their nearly invisible stars. So whoever said you need a lion or an elephant to be a global sensation? Fleas absolutely proved that size truly doesn't matter when it comes to dazzling an audience. These tiny bloodsuckers, often nourished directly by the performers themselves, were harnessed and put to work, astonishing crowds with their minuscule strength and surprising agility. They pull miniature carts and spin Ferris wheels, demonstrating that even the smallest creatures could achieve monumental feats of entertainment. The flea, once a symbol of historical misery, was transformed into a celebrated, albeit tiny, celebrity. Think fleas are ancient history, a relic of the past? Not a chance. These tiny terrors are still very much in business, and they've found a luxurious new setup, our homes. Thanks to our beloved furry friends, fleas have an all-access pass right into our living rooms, onto our carpets, and even, yes, into our beds. They're like uninvited, microscopic roommates who never pay rent, but always demand a blood meal. Your pampered pet? More like their personal, four-legged Uber, dropping them off for a midnight snack right on your ankle. And because they're such persistent little pests, we've had to pour a staggering amount of resources into kicking them out. The global flea treatment market is worth over $10 billion annually. We're talking about billions spent on everything from fancy shampoos and pills to sprays and collars, all just to keep these minuscule invaders at bay. It's a never-ending, highly profitable battle, and the fleas are definitely making humanity pay a hefty price for their presence. Despite all our technological advancements, from space travel to artificial intelligence, a single tiny flea bite can still drive a human absolutely bonkers. That maddening itch, that sudden unwelcome red bump, it's a constant, infuriating reminder that even the smallest creatures can wield immense power over our comfort and sanity. They might not be toppling empires anymore, but they're still perfectly capable of ruining a perfectly good night's sleep, one tiny, infuriating jump at a time. Who would have thought? These tiny terrors, these microscopic marvels, have been literally jumping through history since the time of the dinosaurs. From biting ancient lizards and our early ancestors, to hitchhiking across continents and causing chaos in empires, fleas have stubbornly clung on, proving themselves the ultimate historical survivors. So, history isn't just written in the grand tales of kings and battles. Sometimes it's scribbled in the maddening itch of a flea bite and the devastating diseases they spread. They shook empires, inspired bizarre entertainment like the Flea Circus, and still remind us that even the smallest creatures can have the biggest impact. From ancient killer to tiny entertainer, the flea's journey is truly wild. So, next time you feel a little tickle, remember these tiny giants and their epic tale. Don't forget to subscribe for our next historical adventure.